This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, 212th Trooper, Silas 1610, Carmen CJ, Runescribble, Kitsu the Kitsune, Blood Down, and Gookie Dookie, and brought to you by Normandy 1998 who requested this topic. If there is a video you want me to make, just head over to Patreon and become a channel member, and select the Pickled Producer tier, since among other benefits, you'll get to make a video request every month, be it the continuation of an existing series or a brand new story. Now, before we get into today's story, I just want to ask you to do me a favor. Hit that like button, since it tells YouTube you enjoy what I do, and check whether you're subscribed, since only about a quarter of my viewers are, and it's a free way to keep up to date with all my content. In return, I'll do all I can to keep making regular quality content for you. Thanks, and let's hop in. Hey everyone, today I'm starting something I've honestly wanted to do for a long time, a full-scale rewrite and reimagining of Dragon Ball GT in celebration of a very specific anniversary. On February 7th, 1996, Dragon Ball GT premiered its first episode, which means we've somehow reached the 30th anniversary of one of the strangest, most polarizing, and most fascinating entries in the Dragon Ball franchise. GT is a weird one. It isn't Toriyama's manga continuation, but it also isn't just some forgotten spin-off either. It's this official sequel that sits in a strange liminal space, made by Toei, shaped by the anime's own continuity, and carrying the impossible burden of following one of the most beloved series in shonen history. And because of that, GT has always been divisive. For years it's been seen as the black sheep, the series that went wrong, the sequel people argued about, and the one that didn't live up to Z. But at the same time, it also has genuinely compelling ideas. Baby, the shadow dragons, the sense of scale, that melancholy final goodbye. GT is messy, but it's not meaningless. And in recent years, especially with the franchise expanding into Super, and even having some of GT's beats revisited in Daima, GT has earned something of a reappraisal. Not as a perfect series, but as an ambitious one. A show that swung for something mythic, even if it didn't always land. So, for the 30th anniversary, I want to take another swing at it. Not to fix GT out of spite, but to ask what if GT had been allowed to fully explore its best themes? What if it had a more coherent character focus that allowed it to fully utilize its cast instead of just being Goku time, and a chance to examine its themes like the legacy of the Saiyans and over-reliance of the Dragon Balls more in depth? Now, before I get into this story, I want to lay out the ground rules for this project, because they're going to shape how I handle things moving forward. This rewrite treats Dragon Ball continuity with a very specific cutoff. Anything established before February 7th, 1996 is canon, and anything introduced after that point is optional, reinterpreted, or ignored. So this is essentially a GT that is building directly off the world Dragon Ball had created up to that moment, the end of Z era, specifically the anime continuity, and the atmosphere of the original ending. That means no Beerus, no Gods of Destructions, no super retcons. Not because I dislike them, but because they belong to a completely different era of Dragon Ball's storytelling. And this rewrite is trying to imagine what GT could have been using the pieces it had at its disposal, and admittedly 30 years of hindsight. But without further ado, let's hop into the reimagined world of Dragon Ball GT, and don't forget to tell me your ideas for a GT rewrite in the comments below. Our story begins on a familiar world, King Kai's planet, now restored along with the blue deity himself thanks to the Dragon Balls, with him watching as his latest disciple moves with speed and power as they execute a flurry of martial arts moves unfazed by the world's increased gravity. Even the heavy hammer he'd instructed them to use to chase Gregory upon first arriving does not slow them down, with the warrior picking up mid-strike and integrating into their pattern as though it were an extension of themselves. Then, once they have grown comfortable with the added weight, they hurl it as hard as they can, so it circles around the planet, only for the fighter to spin in place and drive their fist into the face of the mallet, stopping it dead mid-air while a shockwave ripples out from the point of impact. As the camera follows the shockwave outward, the mystery student is revealed to be none other than Goku's granddaughter Pan, now a teenager or thereabouts, dressed in a teal gi and white belt akin to Goku's design at the end of Z, though while his pants were cyan, hers are white like her maternal grandfather Mr. Satan. In that moment, she is the determined expression of her parents and the other Saiyan heroes whenever they fight, though as the hammer falls and King Kai yelps at her to stop putting holes in his lawn, she laughingly apologizes while rubbing the back of her head, causing the North Kaioshin to briefly see another happy-go-lucky Saiyan he once trained. Nonetheless, he praises her strength and martial arts discipline, commenting that he hasn't seen such impressive growth since Goku came here in preparation for the Saiyan invasion. At the mention of the warrior race, something in Pan shifts, as she curiously asks King Kai what the Saiyans were like, though this does not yield the information she craves, as the catfish god simply states they were generally a rotten bunch the galaxy are better off without, before hastily correcting that he didn't mean her and her family, of course. Goku's honestly one of the least Saiyan-like guys he's ever met. Smiling a little wistfully, Pan assures him that it's okay, she's not offended by his words. Though, before she can say more, Kibito Kai appears behind the pair and questions if Pan is ready to go. Hanging her head a little little, the courtesan questions if it's really time, though smiling politely. The fused deity confirms that it's been 158 days, which is the time frame she and her parents agreed to. Seeing she's not going to be able to weasel her way out of this one, Pan complies, thanking King Kai for his training, then taking hold of Kibito Kai's arm so they can leave. Though before she does, she makes one quick request of him. Instead of dropping her off at home, could he take her to Grandma Chi-Chi's place instead? Looking down at her with mild suspicion, the long-haired Kai muses the agreement was to bring her straight home, though when she gives him the big eyes in her best please, he relents and teleports them both to Mount Paozu instead. Following another brief goodbye and Kibito Kai's return to Otherworld, Pan makes her way inside the old house. Despite the time that's passed since her last visit, the place is familiar as ever, with Grandma Chi-Chi cooking up a storm while her Uncle Goten lounges on the couch reading a magazine. At the sight of her, however, both break out in wide grins, with Chi-Chi being the first to embrace her granddaughter, as she questions how she's been, while also demanding to know if that old pervert Roshi tried anything funny while she was training with him, and whether Korin and Dende fed her enough, since the latter doesn't eat, and the former subsists on magic beans that aren't a suitable diet for a growing girl. Pulling herself out of this smothering hug, Pan assures her grandma that she's fine. She just came here to ask a question about Grandpa Goku. At once, the mood shifts, growing slightly somber, as Chi-Chi begins to reply that he's still not back from training Oob, as though Pan didn't already know. Though, shaking her head, the girl replies that she just wanted to know if he ever mentioned anything about the Saiyans to either of them. Looking thoughtful, Chi-Chi admits that she doesn't think so, since from what she remembers, Goku lost all memory of them when he arrived on Earth. While joining them, Goten laughs that his dad wasn't exactly the storytelling type, preferring to communicate through sparring. Speaking of which, how'd you like to go around for old time's sake, since then they'll see if her training trips really paid off. Grinning fondly at her uncle's teasing, Pan agrees that he's on, while Chi-Chi yells at both of them not to start fighting in the house. Acquiescing to this, the pair soon find themselves outside as they launch at each other with a flurry of punches and kicks. At first, Goten seems to have the upper hand, his natural talent and greater reach giving him an advantage, though what Pan may lack in size, she makes up for in speed and determination, as she ducks under his next set of hits, and then flashes into Super Saiyan to give her Counter-Strike's extra force. Skidding backwards, Goten asks when she learned to do that, though smirking a little, Pan teasingly asks if he can still go Super Saiyan, to which the elder hybrid protests that he can, it's just been a while. In an attempt to prove this point, he then powers up as well, with the pair clashing once more, though as the fight progresses something becomes apparent. Pan's endurance far exceeds Goten's, who has gotten noticeably rusty in the intervening years, so that after a while he drops back to base and concedes the fight, while telling her to cut him some slack since he's old. Still smirking, Pan teases that lazy would be more accurate, though all the same she thanks him for a great fight. While smiling too, Goten advises her to return to base before Chi-Chi sees her, since his mum would probably cry if she saw Pan with delinquent hair. Laughing along with him, Pan replies that actually she should probably get going anyway, and while Goten tells her to say hi to Gohan and Videl for him, when Pan takes flight, it is not for home, but instead for Capsule Corp. Touching down on the main balcony, the courtesan is greeted by Bulma, who instinctively starts telling her that Bra's not home at the moment, though when Pan replies she's not here for her childhood friend, Bulma next switches to Trunks, only to be shocked when the girl explains that she's actually here to see Vegeta. Wondering aloud why Pan would want to see him of all people, she nonetheless points her towards the gravity room, where as promised, Vegeta is training alone. Unlike the warm reception she has received thus far, Vegeta does not even stop his shadowboxing, instead demanding to know what she's doing here, and seeing no need for preamble, Pan comes right out and says it, asking him to tell her everything about the Saiyans. Narrowing his eyes slightly, the prince next asks why she wants to know, to which the girl remains equally forthright, admitting that for a while now she's been thinking about her heritage and how she plays into the legacy of the Saiyans. Bluntly, Vegeta tells her that she doesn't. The Saiyans were a race of ruthless warriors who committed atrocities both for their own benefit and under Frieza's orders. Meanwhile, she's an Earthling with Saiyan blood who was born into peacetime, so she shouldn't go looking for blood on her hands that isn't there. While this has been meant as something akin to reassurance in a very Vegeta-like way, Pan only hears dismissal, and the contemptuous belief that she isn't Saiyan enough, either in spirit or because she's the only hybrid to be more than half human. Either way, she is quick to flare up in response, demanding to know why he won't tell her, though when the prince simply ignores her, having no time for childish histrionics, she storms out, not even saying goodbye to Bulma as she flies away. Not long after this, she arrives home, finding the house to be exactly as she remembers it, down to the familiar sound of her mum training in the home gym, while her dad is no doubt working on his next academic paper down the hall. While she has missed them both dearly, after the conversation with Vegeta she doesn't feel much like talking, and so instead settles in on the couch, with it coming as a surprise that Bulma installed the intergalactic satellite dish during her absence, wanting to check out what the universe is watching, and perhaps vainly hoping she might find some answers to her Saiyan question. She turns on the TV, though to no avail, as she flips through several channels before stopping on a news report about some kind of galactic hero. Being reminded of her dad's old Saiyaman days, she lingers on this for a while, watching as this guy uses his technologically advanced suit to combat natural disasters, rescue civilians, and battle bad guys, before each time leaving behind a symbol at the scene of his victory, both as a warning to evil and a promise to the innocent that their world is now under the protection of the Super Tuffle. Without meaning to, Pan quickly finds herself enthralled, to the point where she visibly jumps when her mother's voice speaks up behind her, commenting that she's pretty sure Satan City's hero of justice could take this joker any day of the week. Spotting that she has her daughter's attention, Videl welcomes Pan home, with the pair sharing a tender embrace. While making his own way down the hall, Gohan smiles that he thought he heard Pan. For a time, the family simply engage in small talk, with the girl recounting her time with King Kai and how it differed from her previous training with Roshi, Korin, Dende, and Piccolo over the last few years. However, as her parents, it does not take Gohan and Videl long to recognize that something is weighing on Pan, with them asking her what's wrong, since she always comes back from these trips a bit wistful, but this feels like something more. Trusting them to understand, the young courtesan explains that she hoped maybe by training with all of Grandpa Goku's old mentors she'd end up close to him and her heritage, but King Kai was his final master, and she still doesn't know where she fits into everything. Soothingly, her parents assure her these feelings are a normal part of growing up, but refusing to accept this, Pan protests that it's more than that. She needs to understand her Saiyan lineage if she's to have any chance of understanding herself. Looking back to the TV, which is still showing an alien program, she then makes her most shocking declaration of all, that for her next journey, she wants to go to space and see what she can learn about the Saiyan race. Naturally, Gohan and Videl are hesitant, since this is a big and dangerous endeavor. Though holding her ground, Pan points out that Gohan went to space when he was a third of her age, and besides, this would make for a great research piece. As she had hoped, this does start to win her father over, though being a sensible man, he adds that when he went to space he had 2 adults with him, so she'd need that before they could even begin to consider this trip. Grinning broadly, Pan declares this no problem, before nominating Goten and Trunks, a duo her parents obviously aren't enamored with from their reactions. Nonetheless, they do technically count, with Gohan relenting while Videl wonders aloud why Pan has to be so much like her grandpa Goku, always rushing off on adventures. Why couldn't she be more like her maternal grandfather, who's such a couch potato he never leaves the house unless it's for a public appearance? Nonetheless, recognizing how important this is to Pan, the pair do eventually agree, with them putting in a call to Bulma, who is more than happy to build them a spaceship even better than the one Goku took to Namek. Likewise, Goten and Trunks also accept Pan's request to join her on this mission, with Goten being eager for a space road trip full of alien babes, while Trunks is slightly more reluctant, as he just knows these two are going to get into all kinds of trouble that he's going to have to sort out. And so it is that a few days later the new spacefaring trio assemble at Capsule Corp, while their families see them off and wish them luck on this quest to investigate the Saiyans. As the most technologically capable of the three, Trunks is the one who takes the pilot's seat. Then, when he's sure his comrades are ready, he fires up the thrusters and takes them into orbit, while an excited Pan stares out at the stars, eager to begin her grand tour. And that brings us to the end of what would be episode 1 of our GT rewrite. Since I spent way too long on that, I'll try to keep things a bit more brief moving forward. Next up for our heroes would be something quite similar to canon, the Mecha Mini arc, though with a few tweaks. For those who've only seen the American release of GT that synthesized much of the grand tour into a recap episode, this arc featured the gang crash landing on a desert planet ruled by the greedy Don Key, who branded them as criminals and had his right-hand man, the mercenary Ledgic, confront them. This would still happen, as it would give Goten, Trunks, and Pan a chance to show off their individual skills and personalities, as Goten would try and charm and haggle with the vendors to reduce their overinflated prices, Trunks would use his mechanics eye to recognize the parts they need to repair their ship amidst all the junk, and Pan would fill the Goku role, both for good and for ill, as she'd inadvertently scare off the townsfolk with her straightforwardness and power, but later when facing Ledgic, she would prove herself the main fighter of the trio, going Super Saiyan against the Merc like Goku did, and earning his interest, as he offhandedly recognizes her as a Saiyan, suggesting familiarity with the race. As this is exactly what she's out here looking for, Pan would be eager to learn more, but having recognized that he's outclassed and that no paycheck is worth dying for, Ledgic would bail, leaving the Saiyan trio back at square one, though with the consolation that without his chief enforcer, they are easily able to liberate a mecha from Don Key, returning the planet to peace before departing for the stars once more. From here there'd be about 3 or 4 more standalone episodes, some in space, some on new planets, giving each of the core trio a bit more spotlight and a chance to save the day and deepen their character. For example, example, the Pan episode could take place on the ship as she tries to push the boys into training more after the challenges they've faced, only to be met with disinterest, which she would construe as laziness. However, through a conversation with Goten, she'd come to realize that not everyone lives for the pursuit of growth the way she does, since as Goten explains it, he began training as a way to play with Trunks along with his mum and Gohan. His ambition was never to be the strongest, since he grew up in a world that had Gohan, Vegeta, and later his dad. Instead, he did it for fun, and so when Gohan moved out, his mum got too old to spar with him, and finally his dad went off to train Oob, it stopped being fun, so he just kinda quit. This at last gives Pan some empathy for her uncle, with the pair reaching a compromise where they'll spar together, since that way Pan can pursue her goals of strength, while Goten can enjoy the fun of working out alongside family once again, with even Trunks joining them occasionally, despite having also semi-retired from fighting to pursue his work at Capsule Corp alongside Bulma. Finally, however, the gang would arrive on a trading post planet, where they would split up to look for anything to do with Saiyans, only to come up empty, though Goten would spot Ledric among the crowd and attempt to tail him since he remembers the interrupted conversation Pan tried to have with the mercenary back on Nameca. This would lead him to a seedy space bar, where Ledric would be meeting a client, and while the younger son of Goku would try to stay incognito, his attempts at eavesdropping would comedically fail, resulting in him being brought before the pair. However, unlike Don Key, this time Ledric's employer would be a friendly alien caravan leader, who is in the process of contracting him as additional security while they journey through a particularly dangerous part of space. Figuring this will give Pan a chance to question Ledric in person, and that the three of them can handle whatever trouble the convoy might face, Goten convinces the caravan leader to hire the hybrid Saiyan crew as well, with this earning mixed reactions from his friends when he returns to them, as Pan is ecstatic that he got them this lead and a chance to help people in need, while Trunks more pragmatically grumbles about what such a detour will do to their fuel reserves. Nonetheless, when the caravan resumes its journey, the Saiyans go with it, with Trunks flying the Capsule Corp ship while Pan, Goten, and Ledric are stationed on the main cargo hauler, as that's what pirates will be most likely to attack. This gives Pan a chance to speak with the teal-skinned mercenary, though as she will learn, he is as tight-lipped as he is deadly, and is unwilling to give anything away for free, especially when they should be focusing on the job at hand. Showing that patience is not one of her strengths, Pan tries to argue they can work and talk at the same time, though to her dismay she is repeatedly stonewalled, until finally Goten has to hold her back when she demands to fight Ledric for the information. However, it seems she won't get the chance, as at that moment alarms blare, alerting everyone to the arrival of pirates who begin boarding the cargo ship. Putting their differences aside, Pan, Goten, and Ledric all rush into battle, showing off their unique abilities as they defend from the oncoming horde of raiders. While the heroes hold the advantage in terms of strength, the pirates have sheer numbers on their side, as for each one of them Goten, Pan, and Ledric take down, two more burst into the cargo hold, with it seeming as if nothing will stem the tide. That is until Pan spots something through the porthole, a silver streak racing through the stars in their direction, only for it to change course at the last second, switching its target from them to the pirate ship. A moment later, the unknown silver object collides with the enemy vessel, tearing through it with such force that it explodes, while even the docked cargo ship shakes from the impact. Using this to their advantage, the heroes quickly subdue the now finite group of pirates. While looking at the porthole once again, Pan sees the silvery streak was in fact an aura, which now fades, revealing the super tuffle floating outside. Though he is not there for long, as now that the threat has been dealt with, he draws a laser weapon and fires several quick shots into the cargo ship's hull, marking it with his symbol before flying away without a word or a backwards glance. Inside the ship, Pan and Goten are both in awe of how cool the super tuffle is, with this being supported by the rest of the convoy, who are quick to celebrate their good fortune of having been saved by the galactic hero. Only Ledric remains unimpressed, though this is hardly surprising considering his aloof nature. However, he does at least concede that Pan and Goten did fight well during the encounter, so he will tell them what he knows about Saiyans. For the most part, this is nothing new, as he recounts how they were a warrior race who served under Frieza for many years, though he does reveal that in the course of his travels he has come across a couple of them, either now elderly deserters who survived the destruction of planet Vegeta, or more commonly their half-alien children. Eagerly, Pan asks where she can find them, to which Ledric replies that she's in luck, since a few months ago, while getting his ship repaired, he met a half-Saiyan mechanic on planet Gisei, which isn't too far from here, so if she heads there, she should be able to find him. Not long after this, the caravan arrives at its destination with no further trouble, and while the Saiyans are offered to stay on as security like Ledric, they decline, as now that they finally have a concrete lead, they're not going to squander it, with the trio boarding their ship and taking off towards the location Ledric gave them. However, before they can go there, they must make one final detour, since partway through the journey, Trunks informs his companions that it seems they don't have enough fuel to make it all the way to planet Gisei, forcing them to make a refueling stop on what appears to be a space station in the middle of an asteroid field. At once, Pan and Goten are quick to note how creepy this place is, as having evidently been left abandoned and derelict for a long time, most of the power is gone, with the only light coming from flickering fluorescent emergency bulbs that cast an eerie glow on the rundown halls. Figuring the bridge might have some controls to transfer fuel, the trio descend deeper in together, though as they will soon learn, they are not alone, as heavy clanging footfalls alert them to the presence of several large robots, each of whom bark out garbled statements about containment and contamination. However, these are not run-of-the-mill sanitation bots, as when one of them fires a jet of liquid at Trunks which he narrowly avoids, the trio are horrified to see that it is a highly concentrated acid, as it promptly dissolves the place the purple-haired hybrid had just been standing. And that is not all these robots have going for them, as when Pan and Goten rush in, their armor plating proves capable of withstanding hits from a pair of Super Saiyans. Recognizing that fighting might not be the ideal solution, Trunks yells for his comrades to fall back and follow him as he makes a break for the bridge. Unfortunately, this cannot be a straight dash, as the sanitation bots are quick to give chase, forcing the Saiyans into a creeping game of hide-and-seek aboard the derelict space station, as they keep their powers suppressed and attempt to make their way to the Central Command, where they can shut down the roving machines and get the fuel they came here for. Though of course, nothing can be so simple, as just when they see the entrance to the bridge down the hall, one of the sanitation bots bursts into view, and having locked onto the source of the contamination, it signals its brethren. Knowing they're out of time, Pan tells Trunks to go ahead and do what he has to while she and Goten hold off these hunks of junk, in order the eldest Saiyan does not protest, wishing his friends luck and putting his faith in them as he flies onto the bridge. As the sound of fighting rings down the hall, Trunks tries to fire up the main computer, only to find it too damaged to even initiate a boot-up sequence. Cursing his luck, the purple-haired hero next attempts to take a page from his mother's book, as he frantically tries to jury-rig a new central computer by hooking the damaged one to one of the few operational terminals here on the bridge. While most of those are monitoring important functions like life support that he doesn't want to risk overriding, he eventually comes across one for auxiliary systems, and figuring that's okay to do away with, he plugs in the old central computer, and watches as the screen shifts to a series of commands. By now, Pan and Goten have been pushed far enough that Trunks can hear them yelling at him to hurry up, and seeing no point in delaying, he inputs command for all sanitation robots to shut down. At once, the hulking machines go inert, with the other two hybrid Saiyans thanking him for the assist. Then, when they are sure the threat has passed, Trunks initiates a refueling protocol so they can get back on their way. However, all is not what it seems, as while Pan, Goten, and Trunks board their ship and return to the stars, a computer screen in a pitch-black room near the bottom of the space station flares to life. On it are the words, "Cryostasis 100%, though after a moment, that number drops to 99. Meanwhile, returning to our heroes, they at last arrive on Gisei, which is in the middle of a planet-wide celebration, as the Super Tuffle has agreed to take a short break from his heroics to allow one of the worlds he has most frequently saved to honor him. While Goten, Trunks, and Pan do enjoy the party vibe, and even agree that heroes deserve their due, this does make it harder for them to look for the mechanic, as the streets are full of revelers, and by the time they find someone who can point them to the mechanic's shop, they find that it is closed for the day. Figuring he might be out celebrating, the trio decide to split up and take to the air so they can search from above, while in another part of the city, the Super Tuffle touches down so he can meet with the planetary governor. In contrast to his confident demeanor in combat, the hero is somewhat awkward and terse as he shakes the governor's hand, stating that while he appreciates Gisei's devotion, surely it would be a better use of his time if he were helping those in need. Laughing heartily, the rather rotund governor lightly admonishes that this is why he's the galaxy's hero, but people also need to see their champion up close, to watch him walk among them and hear him speak since it gives them hope. Seeing the sense in this, the Super Tuffle does not protest, instead following the man down to a cordoned-off stretch of street where a series of parade floats are parked. In a tone of pride, the governor begins showing them off, as well as going through the proceedings that will occur once the parade begins. Though in that moment the Tuffle warrior does not even hear him, and not because of the cheering crowd half leant over the barricades to scream their love for him, but because something else has drawn his attention, a flashing in the corner of his helmet's visor that outlines one of the crouched figures working on the floats, a man who is holding a wrench with a brown furry tail. Excusing himself, the Super Tuffle then makes a beeline for this stranger, who upon spotting the hero straightens up with a smile as he asks what he can do for him. All awkwardness gone from his tone now as it only carries a clinical determination, the Super Tuffle asks if this man is a Saiyan, to which the mechanic laughs and nods that he's a half Saiyan on his mother's side. However, this is a fatal error, as with his worst fears confirmed, the galactic hero acts with the same decisiveness he did against the space pirates, pulling out his laser gun and shooting the man dead. Having been flying nearby, Pan hears the shot ring out, and turning her eyes downwards, she sees the Super Tuffle standing over the body of the Saiyan mechanic. Dropping to the ground, she demands to know how he could do something like this when he's supposed to be a hero. Though, still in that tone of calm determination, he replies that she's too young to remember the Saiyans, but they were a race of insatiable pillagers and conquerors who left nothing but pain and death in their wake. To allow even one of them to continue existing as a threat to the galaxy he cannot allow or overlook, so it's his duty as a defender of the innocent to put an end to them wherever they may appear. These words strike Pan to her core, leaving her feeling cold and sick, and seeing that she has nothing to say, the Super Tuffle steps away from her to address the crowd, who have seemingly not reacted at all to the shooting, as they continue to cheer him on. In that polite but slightly awkward voice again, he apologizes to them, not for what he just did, but because it serves as a reminder that evil is ever present, and he cannot afford to let his guard down for even a moment. So while he is deeply grateful for this celebration, he must leave them and return to his duties. With this, he takes flight, becoming that silvery streak once more as he leaves the atmosphere in search of villains who need stopping, and people who need saving. Meanwhile, Pan finally finds her voice, but now it is already too late, as the so-called hero is gone, and his victim has grown still at her feet. Worse even than that, though, is that all around her, the crowd continue to cheer and wish the Super Tuffle luck, as Pan cannot understand how they can do this after what they've just witnessed. Stumbling her way towards them on numb feet, the Quarter Saiyan asks why none of them are outraged that their hero just killed a man, their neighbor, in cold blood, then left. However, here she is met by the same answer given in slightly different ways. While they may not understand why he did it, they trust the man who has saved them countless times, and have faith he had a good reason to do what he did. This complete endorsement of the Super Tuffle is more than Pan can take, and so turning her eyes away from the revelers, she instead looks up at the place he had vanished, and comes to a decision. Her grand tour is over. Now it's time to find the so-called galactic hero, and bring him to justice. And that brings our rewritten Grand Tour arc to a close. Join me next time as we delve into the next arc in the conflict with the Super Tuffle. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.